Hello, everyone. This is Overtop. My name is Nick Lorenzo. Today's guest is someone with an extensive career in the movie industry. He's a film director, a writer, and a producer. He's originally from Venezuela, where he left in 2002, and he has been living in Canada since. I want to welcome to the show to Javier Badillo.
Oh, hello, Nick. I am good. I'm good. Thank you for having me in your show. It's a pleasure and an honor. Thank you.
Absolutely. No, thank you for making the time to speak with us and to give some insight of your career, your life as an immigrant over there in Canada. Yeah, last year you released your first feature film. The title of the movie is Rose to Etheria. I had a chance to look a little bit at the movie and that, but I want to know because for me was I thought for me was one is about the current events, war in the Middle East, and the other side I thought is from a more individual perspective. It's like someone an individual saying, "Why I'm here? I'm wasting my time when I have a bigger dream, which is his dream of making perfumes." Tell me, Javier, where the inspiration came from for you to make this movie.
Okay, great question. Great way to start. So Rose of Itria is my first feature, and so it was one where I felt that I could say the most without having to be censored or be dictated by the money investment in film. Right, a lot of the time when the bigger the movie, the more money is, and the less you can say because of all the money. So as a first feature, you have the luxury and the duty really to be able to speak your mind as freely as you can. And so I co-wrote this with my friend and co-producer and lead actor Cheyenne Bayat, and we both we're trying to bring our own personal experiences into the film. And my experience as a Venezuelan immigrant to Canada, the difficulties of leaving one country and leaving everything behind to start over was one of the things that informed the drama, the narrative. The Middle Eastern angle was partly because Cheyenne is Persian. He's from Iran, and he's migrated since he was very young to the United States and then to Canada. But he's very well informed with the Middle East situation and with the geopolitics. And I also have a past of having lived in Lebanon in the 80s. And so I have a sympathy, an empathy with the region and its people. And that also compelled me to pursue that line as a movie, as a character that is in Syria and has to choose between his family and a life on his own, or go back to fighting for ideologies and for problems that plague the region and the entire world for that matter. But it became more of an exploration for the person, choosing what they want to do for themselves and their future. So to me, that resonated strongly in the way that I see the world and the way that I see how we are, for the most part, if we are privileged enough to have the choice, to have the option to choose what is the path for ourselves. And so that movie allowed me to unload all that was in my heart and my head, along with my partner Cheyenne, into a self-contained, affordable movie that we could make as a first endeavor into filmmaking. So yeah, that's. Thank you for asking me that question, because I wanted to unpack the reasons.
Now, you touch on a point that interests me, which is the funding. All money come with condition. I did read somewhere that your funding, I'm not sure if it was for this movie too, was a mix of self-funding, crowdfunding. That was that's the way you put together, you and your partner put together the budget, or was there, other individual party that had the say because they put money, had the say in the script of the movie?
Yes. So that's a very good point. And it also, that applies mostly to American movies that have a high budget and a lot of investment that is private. In Canada, however, we have a different financing model. where we use government financing. We use taxpayers' money. We use institutions of culture and the arts. And to them, their first priority is to support the views of the artists in Canada, and more recently, where they are finally involving a much larger group of the population that was historically more benefited by colonial, by the way that the structure was designed in its colony, within its colonial days. It kept a lot of Black and Indigenous and people of color out. And so over the past, I would say 20, 25 years, Canada and other countries as well, but Canada, I've seen firsthand how it has implemented measures so that BIPOC people are able to also access public funding to create independent cinema and tell their own stories. It has been quite encouraging to see that. However, my first feature film, Rose of Ithria, was fully self-financed, which means that I did it through crowdfunding, doing internet campaigns so people can donate $5, $10, $20. And I did fundraising parties, bake sales at the coffee shop where I work. They were very nice and let me, invite the neighbors to come and donate $5 to watch my short movies,
Wow,
and
that's
help me
amazing.
make my first. Yeah, it was very, very nice collaboration with the community that I live here in East Vancouver. So I was, it's more like being an entrepreneur, having your own business and trying to
Yeah,
start with.
absolutely. Yeah, if banks won't give you money, you got to do that. Yeah,
That's right. That's right.
but
The second feature, though, is like that.
go ahead, please.
No, well, I mean that the first one is why it's the easiest, not the easiest, but the one that you have the most control over the material, and you can decide where the money is coming from and where it's spent. Obviously, it's a lot of volunteering. Nobody gets paid. It's a labor of love. It took me 5 years of my life, right? And it only cost $30,000, in total in over 5 years. And so, it was done on the weekends and that sort of thing when people have time in their schedules to help as a volunteer. So, it is a long, protracted effort to make, your first feature is
It
usually
is.
like that.
It is. It's kind of
Yeah,
guerrilla financing, all that stuff. But you have another feature film coming out. It's going to be released in 2026, if I'm not mistaken. Lupe Q and the
that's
Galactic Earworms, right? I saw
that's
I saw some highlights. What popped up in my eyes was that was a very diverse cast. Tell us about the story, and how is the process going sort of for us to finally see that movie next year, in 2026.
that's right. That's right. Yes. So Lupe Q and the Galactic Earworms was an idea that was originated between me and my wife. We co-wrote this script about 2 years ago or 3 years ago before I had finished Roads of Ithria. So as we were finishing Roads, then we were writing that movie together. And it was mostly because my wife saw that I had a funny bone in me and I have some humor and I had some other interests, and she said, why don't you try to do something like that? And also in touch with your Latin roots, I mean, you've made a lot of short movies and your first feature is based with in a middle-aged, Middle East character. So why don't you try to do something that is more Hispanic? And that, it struck me as a novelty because I was not to deal with my own stories personally as a Latino immigrant, because I never really saw the possibility of that. Any of the environment, there's not many Latinos. I I would collaborate with whoever is around me. And so only when she came on and she came aboard, and she's Canadian, by the way, she's not Latina,
Okay.
you know
But so
American immigrant descendant,
she Javier, she's right about you being funny because before you start doing feature film, you did a lot of shorts, and there are a few comedy shorts too. So she's right on that. I read that about you, but go ahead, please.
Yes, I mean, I think that was what I needed, a little push into that direction. Like, think a bit bigger. What would you like to watch in the cinema? What would you be excited to pay a ticket to buy and watch some popcorn? And then I said, well, I do love science fiction and comedies, and I love punk rock because I played music all my life, and said, why not put it all together? And well, lo and behold, I mean, that kind of snowballed and became a lot bigger than either of us expected, which is wonderful.
That's good. And for Lupe Q and the Galactic Earworms, in what stage is the movie? Because we're at the end of the 2024, so we have, I don't know, another year. So in what stage is the movie itself?
Yeah, right. So we were writing it back in 2022. Imagine that, 2022 we wrote, and then we applied for some grants in Canada. I received the Canadian Telefilm grant. Telefilm is the federal Canadian grant for films. If you make a feature film, they are the ones you want to ask for funding.
Correct.
So they approved the request. And that was in early 2023. And at that point, it was a request for a $1.5 million budget. And you have to understand, I have never seen that money. I don't know what it looks like, and I don't even know if that was enough to make the movie that I wrote. I just said, like, maybe it's $1.5 million. I had no idea. And then they said okay. So when they said okay, I was like, oh, now I have to figure out how to make this. Okay,
Wow.
so when that happened, and that caught me by surprise. So it was great in a way, and terrifying in the other, because, well, now there's all this money that I need to be responsible for. So I have to hire a producer who understands that amount of money. And so for me, it has been a learning curve, because I have been in the co-pilot seat as a producer, learning from these very experienced producers, Shantam and Michael Parker, who are wonderful people. I got very lucky. And they have taken the project from the $1.5 million that Telefilm originally found, and then they expanded the scope. It then became a co-production with Quebec, with the province of Quebec.
Correct.
The French the French province. And so between the two provinces of Quebec and the province of British Columbia, where I live, they put their money together, and along with additional grants that are available in Canada and other methods of financing, tax credits, all that stuff. And they were able to put the budget a little higher up to about $3.5 million.
Oh,
And to me, that was a mind-blowing, never in my life
I could
would I
imagine
expect.
from 30,000 to two. I mean, it's a big jump.
It's a big jump, right?
Yeah.
To 30 to $3.5 million, it is a huge jump. And so for me, just already by that point, I was completely, you know, overwhelmed in terms of financing and money and numbers. And so I had to trust that these producers, that they understand the value of all the services. Because I think what for me was a big turning point is that, well, when you start paying wages, when you start paying salaries to people, then the money goes away very quickly, because a lot of the budget is paying the people for their
Correct.
time to be. It's like a company.
Yeah.
Now you have a company, and you have to hire 100 technicians and artists so that they can turn this crazy sci-fi action comedy into a movie. And to me, it's like, wow, many different experts and specialists that they get paid whatever they get paid, so that the goal would be to release it in Canadian cinemas in 2026 after we do a festival run. So we do a festival first, and we don't know yet which one. It could be Fantasia, it could be Fantastic Fest, it could be South by Southwest.
Okay.
Those are festivals that look for sci-fi comedy genre movies, right? Those are the ones that we want to go first, see which one will take us. We do our premiere, and then we do a national theatrical release for a short window of time. And then after that, you go for the other windows, which is, VOD, if you're going to put it online, which platforms, like, for example, Shudder on the United States, or, the CBC has their own online platforms. Then you have to negotiate. Well, not me, the producers negotiate, with them so that they can get all the money paid back, right? How to make the money that they invested back. So it's been a learning curve. I'll tell you that much, Nick. It's been an interesting journey. I've learned a lot. I've made mistakes, and I've dusted myself up and kept going, because I think there's just no other way around it, no turning back.
Despite that, that's what you're going to keep on doing, right?
That's right. That's right.
Absolutely. I mean, that's amazing. I mean, in 2023, you were at 30,000 for, on your budget for Road to Victory. Now you're talking about 3 million. It makes me feel that, you're getting a little bit, you're getting in the big leagues, Javier. Is that what I'm sensing here?
Thank you. Yes. I mean, it certainly is what I feel, but I'm sure that people that have been in it for much longer than me are going to be looking at me like, oh, you're just starting out.
Hey,
it's all economy.
Yeah, but that's, for me, it's an evolution. I mean, evolution. Of course, you still have to deal with the quality of the movie, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, this jump on the budget, that tells me people investing, they have a trust on your work, and they have seen something on, what you presented for them to say, yeah, we can risk this money. So it's great to hear that. But one thing I want to
Thank you, Nick.
I want to talk to you about this, how you got here in terms of your career, because you started with music. You were doing punk rock, I believe. You're doing, how was that your first love in terms of this type of industry? How was it, and how you jumped from that to short films? You did a bunch of short films. I can't even count. It's a lot. And there was comedy, as I said below. There was drama. I mean, you did a lot. So music, was that your first love? And how do you jump from music to short film until now having a 3 million budget for a movie?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think it's been quite the journey of discovery, because none of this was planned. It was just really following, what I liked to do, and just keeping consistent, because I think I think if I always set my mind to something, and I just keep doing it until I achieve it. And so music was kind of my first love, my first teacher in terms of resilience, because when you have a band, you are trusting your bandmates so that everybody is making the same song and becoming good together, and then you're performing for other people. And, if people like your song, your band becomes successful, and you in turn become confident that what music you are making, is responding, is people are responding positively to it, or negatively if they hate it, whatever. But at least you're making a song that is creating a response in people.
Correct.
And then it's punk rock, right? I mean, it's designed to be a bit abrasive, a bit standoffish, and or music that is supposed to say difficult things, and very loudly. I was a screamer, like I was screaming, and it was very cathartic, because I could let off all this angst, and all this anxiety and all this. I was very calm, or it taught me to be very calm in the rest of my life.
Looking at you now, I mean, when you tell me you're a screamer, okay, I say, okay, it seems like it, but.
Yes. I mean, it definitely helped me, to find more confidence in my own voice, and I think, eventually the band was very good. I played in Kuala Lumpur for a good 5 years in a band called Lime. It was a punk rock band. It did really well. We toured. we play in concerts of 10,000 people, you know, and for a young man at 17 years old, it gets to your head, you know, you're
At
like, oh my goodness, like
17,
my music,
I thought you were
yeah,
already
my
in your
music really
20s. You were very young.
thanks, man. No, I mean, you know, yeah, it feels like it was a worthy use of my time. You know,
Okay.
I wasn't very good at school. You know, I never really finished high school even. You know, I said, forget it. I'm gonna join the circus. And so, you know, in Malaysia, I said I'm gonna start a band full time. And so, you know, got out of school, and you know, that's not to say for, you know, you should always stay in school, but in my case,
Yes, kids
I
watching
just
this,
decided
stay in
to.
school anyway, unless you're really,
That's
really
right. Stay
great
in
at
school.
something else.
That's right. Unless you really pulled away from it. But
Yeah.
I mean, in my case, that was the case, and so I just dove right in, you know. And I think that's really been kind of the 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 method for me over the years, is to just dive in 100% of the focus, because that's really the only way to get you know, a dream achieved, right? Or, you know, pursue a dream. It's not easy. It's not going to be fast, but I thought that by pursuing it, the band did well. And so when I moved to Canada, the band idea kind of took a second seat.
Uh-huh.
And I came to Canada and did some animation. I got into animation studios. I used to draw a lot when I was a child. And so I thought, well, you know, music is great, but what else can I do that also is interesting and fun and creative? And so animation was great. I did
Yeah.
that for a bunch of years here in Vancouver, but it ended up being a bit of a corporate office job in the end. And I was
Okay.
like, this is not right, you know?
Is that because you couldn't fully deploy your creative side? You had like a lot of
Yeah.
constraints?
Yeah. It's a job, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
get paid and it's good pay, but I mean, it's just for your time so that you can sit on a computer and make some drawings that you don't really know much about. And it's just draw and then deliver. And it's like that. It's like a conveyor belt. It's commercial work,
Correct.
right?
Yeah, I see.
For TV. And so, you know, and that happens in film too, you know, and when you talk about feature films, you know, there's independent cinema where it's like Rose of Ithria, you know, or Lupe Q and the Galactic Heroes. But then there's also Hallmark, you know, and there's also Lifetime movies, you know, movies that are designed to be similar and comfortable because they're a product to be consumed by the
The
masses,
masses,
right?
yeah.
And it's a very different kind of product. I'm not going to say that it's not artistic, because, you know, you require the arts to create the script, to be the actors, to direct. All that is still the art and the
Correct.
craft. But I think only when you are, you know, cursed to want to tell your own stories, then, you know, forget it. That will not do. You know, you're just never satisfied. And so I think that's what happened when I was doing animation. I was just not satisfied because I was not really writing the stories or telling them. I was just simply being hired. It was a joke on being a wrist for hire, because
That's a
that's
nice
really
way to
all
put
that
it.
was. Yeah. And so I decided to quit animation and get a job at a coffee shop, which I still do, you know, and it gives me a lot of joy.
Okay.
Because you know, in a coffee shop, it doesn't pay well, but it doesn't matter because I get all the pleasure from meeting a lot of people, being on my feet, doing things with my hands, the coffee, the smell, very, very
Nice.
sensitive sensors. And so I do enjoy that, you know, and so in the meantime, it keeps me paying my rent while I work on my movies that
Yeah, those bills don't
take
care
maybe a
what you're
lot of.
doing. They just want you to those. Yeah, absolutely.
That's right. That's right. So, you know, it works out in that sense. I think in for the lifestyle that I am happy to lead. You know, if I wanted more things, if I wanted the fancy car, maybe I cannot work in a coffee shop and I would have to work for, you know, the Hallmarks, you know, or I don't
Or
know, go back to
maybe
animation.
you come here to the state, to California, do the coffee shop in LA, so you can be close to Hollywood. Who knows?
That's right. That's right. You know, I thought if I were to start over, that probably would be the case. I mean, I've set my roots in Vancouver. It was a conscious decision and I love it. I mean, I think this city is incredible.
Yeah.
And I got married, and I'm expecting my first baby in March. And so,
Congrats.
I think I
Congrats.
have, thank you, Nick, thank you. I think I have settled my roots here in Canada, and I am,
Not Hollywood for you.
unapologetic.
That's good. But Javier, so it's obviously that you have a creative mind. One thing I wanna ask you is, so because when I see interviews about artists, directors in that space, each of them have their own process of generating their art. How do you get inspired? What inspires you? What stimulates you? The world around you, world event, or personal story that make you come, grab a pen and a paper, start writing? How does it work with you?
Well, it's a good question, because I think every movie or every artistic endeavor that I start has a different beginning. Some projects are started because I collaborate with somebody that I admire,
Okay.
a mind, a person, another artist that I love, whose work I love, and I look to on ways of collaborating with them. If, for example, in the case of Emmanuel, for example, my other feature film documentary is a film that I am not directing, but I am
You're the
producing
producer.
correct. I'm the producer on Emmanuel. And that film was something that I looked out for, because it's a subject matter that I am interested in, the Venezuelan crisis, and all this. So I seeked that project,
I
and
see.
therefore I picked that project to be one of the projects that I have. Same as my short films, for example. It was mostly collaborations with other artists that sparked, an interest in me. Something about them or the story that they had resonated with me personally. And then we together built it. To me, it's more fun to do it together, to do it as a team. I draw a lot of pleasure from that.
In Emmanuel, the feature documentary that you are the producer, is directly linked, and in my view, what's happening in Venezuela, and that ties directly to the migration from Venezuela to other parts of the world. So you said you were seeking a project like that just fell into your hand. How is the situation in Venezuela affecting, on one way or the other, your work or your future project? Is there something else in mind to directly touch on that subject?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I moved out of Venezuela, you know, 20 years ago, and I've only been back once. So my experience with the developing crisis there was pretty much out of high school. The last few years of high school, when the situation began to, be what it became now. So, in a sense, I migrated to Canada just before the country went down the drain. And so I was witnessing the deterioration remotely via phone calls to my mom and dad, to my extended family, WhatsApp and all that. Communication always kept us close. And I could see what was happening. And so, I mean, my parents could see what was happening long before I could see what was happening. So they were the ones who encouraged me to get out now while you can. And so I did. And that was the best decision, in my life. And I thank my parents for that. And so as the years went by, obviously I have a very deep affection for my country, for Venezuela, because, I was raised there. And so I have a deep love for it. And so I wanted to help somehow. I've always, and I still do, want to help in one way or another. And there's many ways of doing it. One of them would be by producing a movie that reflects the situation there, and therefore Emmanuel is occurring, right? And the other ways would be to, I work as a director in the Venezuelan Canadian Society of British Columbia, a society, a nonprofit here that does a lot of fundraising, and we send money to nonprofits and charities in the region that are helping Venezuelans who are escaping the economic collapse of the country. And so there's a lot of aid and support that we from Vancouver do what we can. Obviously, there's not a lot of money, but it's enough for the smaller companies, for the smaller societies to help the migrants, the caminantes, they call them, right? The people who cross the border on foot, because, there's just no money for buses or, and the borders are very difficult to cross in the official ways. And so people cross in the forests, in the rivers and not, so that they can cross to Colombia and Brazil. So that brought me to Emmanuel, because there was already a director making photojournalism in the region. And when I found him, this is Ty Snaden, my friend, and we're friends now. At first it was just me finding Ty Snaden on the internet and seeing his work. And it's like, my God, so like you're right in the thick of it. You're right in the middle of the crisis, and you are in the perfect position to begin making a documentary about these people. At the time, he was doing photography, but I encouraged him to turn his photography into film. And so he had his DSLRs, and he was perfectly capable and happy to switch to audiovisual, to film. So, he was embedded in this small family of Venezuelans who traveled with the two kids and the mom and dad on foot, and eventually reached Bogota, and they were part of the government program of refugees. And throughout all this ordeal, as the child, that Emmanuel was 12, and the documentary ends when he is 17. So we literally see a child grow before his voice even changes, to at the end of the documentary when he's a teenager who has now, learned to live, in Colombia, and understand that he may never go back to Venezuela, and that he's now, part of two countries. And it is a very interesting kind of fly in the wall way of looking at a family without interfering or manipulating the natural progress of events for a family in that situation. Currently, we are in post-production. That means we're in the editing process now. So Ty and I are looking for money to find editors in Toronto and see who can help us to finish the movie. But it's been also a labor of love, for him, mostly for him, because he is out there living in Colombia as a Canadian living in Bogota. And again, it's a lifestyle. He got married there, and now he's still working on this. He's still working on this documentary. He's engaged anyway, but he's still working on this documentary, and we have become very good friends. I went to Colombia last year after working with him for about 4 years. We met in Cartagena at a festival there called Fixie to look for financing, and it was the first time we saw each other in person in 4 years of Zoom calls and phone calls. And it was very touching, very emotional, very beautiful, that to be able to finally see the person that you're together in two countries trying to get this story made into a film. It's not over yet, but it's a wonderful collaboration that I cherish, and I hope to repeat as my career develops, further.
And I know Raw Suitria is available on, I believe, on YouTube, right? It's one of the places.
Yes.
We'll make sure we put that information on the Overtop podcast website for people to go to watch. So will Emmanuel also, I don't know if you can tell us this, will be available in the same way too?
Well, it all depends. I mean, distribution for feature films is kind of a never-ending process, where you try to find the right partner distribution company that is willing to pick it up. And we have been discussing with a number of them, but we have to be careful about it, because a lot of the times, what happens is that there's many distribution companies that take a movie just to be a part of many other movies, and then they package them, and you never really see it in the market, or you never see any revenue from it because it gets buried. Their catalog is so large that they just don't have the resources to really push your movie. So in a lot of ways, filmmakers are faced with the dilemma of like, well, I made this movie in 5 years or 6 or whatever. Am I going to give it to a company for them to not do the work of putting it in the market, their job? And a lot of the times their jobs are not, so we have to do a lot of research. And so we've researched in Colombia for Colombian distribution companies, as well as Toronto. And so it remains there. It remains on the better offer, right? It remains on finding who is giving us the best opportunity for this movie to come out, because it's like raising a child. You've given birth to this kid, and now you have to put him out into the world, and you want the best opportunity for this kid to survive and to come out, and to people to know your kid, your movie, right? And so it's in your best interest to find a good partner to bring that movie to the audiences, and it's our job as producers
It's
to find that.
it's still a long way until we'll be able to watch that documentary. We'll patiently wait for it. What do you
Thank you.
think here in the U.S. The issue of Venezuelan immigrants is within the election, the election here between Donald Trump and
Yeah.
Kamala Harris. Does it have the same impact, the immigration of Venezuelans to Canada the same way? I don't know if you have heard or not, the same impact that is having here in the US.
What I've realized about the US is that there's a lot more people. The population is, 400 million people as opposed to the Canadian population of,
We have
not even
350 million, not four
there
yet,
was
not four yet. Yeah. But
not
yeah, we
400 yet.
have more
Okay, so
people than you guys.
250. Yeah. Okay, and so Canada, I think it's like 30 or something. I forget the amount in Canada. It's not even 100 million people. So what that is, and is a lot of space. And so the biggest conglomerations of the highest densities are in the biggest cities like Toronto and Vancouver. And maybe Calgary. There's a few cities in Canada, not that many, that feel the brunt of immigration.
Yeah.
So it's probably not felt as hard as it is in the United States, also for proximity. It is a lot closer for Latin immigrants to reach the United States than it is to reach Canada.
That's true.
It's farther, it's more expensive to get this far north. And so in that sense, it affects less. And so there's the policies for immigration have been tightening up in Canada as well. And so, it has always been changing depending on who is in government at the time in Canada. So every year kind of changes a little bit on the allowances. In the case of Venezuela, we are running campaigns daily on trying to get the government to provide more resources for Venezuelan refugees to come to Canada, understanding that it is really a fraction of what really needs to happen. You're talking about, 60, 100,000 people, and that's really a fraction of the 7 million of Venezuelans that have left the country. So,
Okay.
but it's something, and every major city in Canada that has Venezuelans and societies of Venezuelans are working to lobby immigration policies in Canada. And we do our part as well in that sense. In terms of how that is politicized, I think that is inevitable everywhere, how the immigration subject becomes another piece of the political rhetoric.
Yeah.
When politicians want to get elected, it becomes the biggest point of conversation.
Correct.
And they will use whatever means they can to sway the public opinion in their favor. So I think all that I can do here really is investigate it from the source, which means that I know who the Venezuelans are coming to Vancouver, or understanding more or less what the requirements for Venezuelans are in British Columbia, and then collaborate with other provinces, their societies, to see what their needs are and see whether that, affects us at a personal level, if there's anything that we can do by requesting funding to help these incoming families that come with very little of possessions and money, right?
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think that's the situation in Canada. It's very different than the United States.
Yeah,
in
very
terms of
different.
political.
Here is a little bit more of a hot button since we are talking about politics. How do you see, and do you believe, world powers like Canada and the US are doing enough to help the situation in Venezuela, to help with the change that obviously needs to happen in Venezuela? Can they do more, or you think otherwise?
I think they can always do more. I don't think that they do enough. But it's a tricky question, because foreign policy, or Canadian foreign policy anyway, is weighed by not only what happens in Venezuela, but what happens globally. And Canada has a big part in other countries as well. And so it's, for example, when the Syrian refugee crisis happened, and it's still happening, but in the beginning, there was a lot of lobbying from the Syrian communities, and it worked in their favor. Like, they actually got the government to allow much larger number of Syrian refugees, despite of how the government used it as a political tool for gaining public favor. It still worked in the sense that there was a shift allowing the policies to support Syrian refugees, even out in the Middle East. So we are doing the same for Venezuela. Basically, we're hoping that by our efforts, collecting signatures, reaching out to the prime minister, reaching out to all the local government officials, that eventually will do what it did to Syria, which is that the government itself will change its policies to allow for more Venezuelans to migrate via the refugee program, which is different than the regular landed immigrant program. And so I think it is possible. I think it requires a lot of effort from the communities that are in the country, the Venezuelan communities, in my case, that you have to coordinate with your community and tell them all to sign, tell them all to do the paperwork. And it's not easy because a lot of people just come here and they don't, it's kind of like they want to just work, and they came to Canada because they want to work and they don't want to think so much about the problems in their country. And so it's hard to rally them into like, actually, I want you to worry about the country still, because it's not over. We need your help. And so it becomes a little tricky because not everybody has the time or the interest when you migrate.
Correct.
Your first problem is immigration and how to stay here and how to get a job. The rental is so expensive, right? Living expenses.
The day-to-day life. Yes, I understand.
Yeah. So it's been an interesting process to see in the past 10 years, even how that pattern has changed in terms of immigration, right? In the shift in government support towards the immigration policies. It's, I'd like to say it's improving, but it's not the rate that we hope it is. It's just not enough, but yeah.
Javier, you also won some awards since you have been there in Canada. You have won the Latin Award nomination in 2018, the Latin Covers Inspiration and Latin Award nomination 2018. But one of the awards I want to ask you about is you were one of the top 25 immigrants awardees in 2019. That is something nice, something really that I want to know how you felt when you were awarded that distinction.
Thank you, Nick. Yes, absolutely. It was an honor. It was a pleasure. I felt recognized by my peers. It is the Top 25 Canadian Immigrant Award is something done every year for, I'm not sure, 30 years, I think it is, by the Canadian magazine, the Immigration magazine. And they usually have a ceremony on every major city of Canada where the peers elect by vote who they think that year deserves the recognition. In my case, I was honored by receiving the award. The reasons of that award is to recognize the work that one does for one's community and to integrate our community of immigrants into Canadian society. They call it pluriculturalism of the person. So if you encourage that integration of your culture into the Canadian fabric, social fabric, then you get a little recognition, and it's a nice recognition because it allows you to be across the country and you meet other people who are also doing their own things, that are bringing their own communities from different countries into Canada, and how they are doing it via their businesses or via their societies, and it's a very empowering because it shows that there's more than just one person. It tends to be isolating if you don't know anyone else doing the work. So it's good to see that there's others, out there trying to also integrate newcomers and educate the people that live already here, educate them on this new immigration, a new country, new cultures, right, to them. So I thought that was wonderful. What I really enjoyed about that mostly is that my parents, my mom and dad, had just been, my brother and I sponsored them to come to Canada in the same year that I got that award.
Yeah, you told me that.
So, for me, it was a double pride for me because my mom and dad were there at the ceremony,
Nice.
seeing that I was doing work to help bring Venezuelans and integrate the community. And so anyway, so it was very nice to have mom and dad there,
That's
Yeah.
nice. You know, it seems like you have a lot of things going on in your life. You are doing movies, you are directing, you are writing, you are producing. I mean, you have a wife, you have a job at the coffee shop, and on top of that, you still have time to mentor youth there in British Columbia. Tell me about that.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I really enjoy that because when I was learning how to make films, I did not have a mentor. I did not have anyone to teach me the ropes. It was mostly out of friendships with other people who also wanted to make a movie. And a lot of the times, kids, they don't know that you can make the movie that is in the cinema. They don't feel that they have access or knowledge or any way in, especially if you are from a cultural minority, especially if you are no, not from the ruling class, as they say it, and so you want to make sure that everybody gets the equity, that get. Well, I personally feel strongly about having a level playing field, and raising up um, uh, young people who also want to tell their stories at the age that I wanted to and didn't have any guidance. So I remember trying to get guidance when I was starting out, and it was difficult because you would have to convince somebody who already had their career and their business and they were making movies. You had to convince them to take you under their wing or teach you the ropes to start. And most of them either didn't have time or didn't have the interest
Mhm.
to do it. And if you go to a film school, which I did for like 8 months, I did a short program at Langara, which is very good. But not everybody gets a chance to go to film school. And on top of that, film schools don't really teach you the business career. They don't teach you how to make a living out of making movies. A film school just teaches you how to point a camera and how to talk to the actor and, how to edit the movie together, the art. But they don't teach you how to go out there and get a job making a movie.
Mm.
And soon, very soon, 90% of the students that graduate from film schools will change careers because they come to the workplace and they don't know, how to make a movie, how to get financing, how to get paid making a movie, how do you balance life and movie? Nobody teaches that. So mentorship is one way of getting around that problem. It's just not enough mentors out there. And so, I sometimes I teach in film schools here. There's a few smaller film schools that I am invited to do courses. Sometimes I teach storyboarding. Sometimes I teach directing. And so that's all fine and good. And sometimes I try to teach them a bit of the business during my classes, even though there's not enough time for it. So the best way to do it is through mentoring.
Yes.
And a lot of the times I find these students from the schools. I tell them, hey, here's my phone number, here's my email address. After you're done class in school, you get in touch with me and we will do a one-on-one, get you the basics so you can understand what it is like to be an independent filmmaker. You want to direct, you want to write, great. I encourage you to do it. But it's also the hardest thing because you go out there just like when you have a punk rock band, and your music sucks and nobody wants to listen to you, and like you're playing in an empty pub. It's the same thing, you gotta believe so hard in your own work that eventually you'll make music or movies that people will enjoy and they will pay you for it. The problem is nobody tells you this in film school.
Mm.
In
Mm.
film school is, look at the famous movies, look at, Martin Scorsese's movies, you learn how they've made their films, but you have no idea how to go out there and make it. You have a rough idea. And what they tell you is like, stay friends with your classmates, make movies with your classmates once you graduate, because you're both going to be doing it for free, because you want to do it. It's a love, it's a passion, right? So anyway, mentoring to me is kind of filling the gap for those film students who feel a little bit, lost or have put a few years, 4 or 5 years into filmmaking, and they're feeling burned out. They're feeling tired and a bit aimless. And so I think that's where I can contribute better, is when they have an idea, an inkling of how it is, but they just don't quite understand it. So I can tell them this is the methods to make a movie professionally in Canada. Because remember, as soon as you leave Canada, you are under a very different system to make films, right? Government funded, federal funded, all that stuff is different
Yeah,
outside. The United States doesn't have a telefilm. There is no telefilm in the United States. There is not a federal funding body for independent cinema. And for better or worse, because in Canada, you just don't get that much money, but you do get some money from the
yeah,
federal government. Whereas in the United States, there is no institution. However, you can raise money in different ways, which is, through private financing and, different ways that you can make films in the US. And they usually command a much higher budget, and
correct.
it comes with other strings attached. But it's a very different method of making movies here in Canada, where it's usually a blend of private and government funding.
Yes,
So anyway, kids don't know that when they graduate school. They don't understand any of this when they finish film school. So
that's
I hope you know yeah.
that's great. Javier, this has been a masterclass for me. I learned a lot about the movie industry. That was great. And was great to know more about your life and your journey since you left Venezuela. I want to thank you, Javier, for making the time to speak with me. I hope my audience I really appreciate, what we discuss here. I hope to speak with you soon again. And until then, you take care of yourself, okay?
Thank you very much, Nick. I appreciate the invitation.